Welcome back. Yes, we'll be talking about electricity. And we've got, as you've seen there, John Omofama, who is a lead consultant for the power sector to Nigeria Governors Forum. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So we understand that they've had several, well, maybe not, maybe two is several still. Several meetings now in the forum, trying to see how to chart the pathway, what to do especially after the president signed that amendment into law. Several people are expecting the governors to, you know what they say here, hit the ground running. So now you are lead consultant. Some ideas are coming through. So what is going on? What should we expect from the forum?
Thank you. First of all, the first step that triggered this was the amendment of the Constitution by President Buhari, or former President Buhari, that now puts electricity, or rather gave unfettered rights to states to make laws for electricity generation, transmission, and distribution, even in areas covered by the national grid. The challenge used to be that states couldn't make laws for electricity in areas covered by the national grid. So the amendment of the Constitution removed that constraint. The states can now make laws across the value chain of electricity. And then the Electricity Act, in keeping to the constitutional provisions, had to be amended or put in place to now make sure that states now had that right in law. And the federal government would also regulate the national market. So what the Electricity Act has created a two-tier electricity market. One, the federal electricity market, and what we're now delving towards now is for states to now have their own electricity markets as well. But it's a very interesting market because the federal market is what you would describe as a wholesale market. So you have generation and transmission. And the electricity distribution will be licensed and regulated by state government. It's a very interesting electricity landscape we're entering into. As regards what the state governors have been doing, having realized or fought for that right to provide electricity for their citizens, the state governors have been making, some states have actually gone ahead to make their laws. Ondo State was the first. We've had Ekiti, we've had Enugu just passed their laws last month. Rivers will soon pass their law anytime soon, and a couple of states. Delta State has also passed the law, and probably they would amend it to now reflect some of the greater powers that states have. So a lot of states have, Ocean State has sent their bill to their House of Assembly. Edo State, they passed their law. Where we are now is now putting in place structures to implement state laws so that you don't have market disruptions. Right? It's important that, yes, there's a federal law, which is the Electricity Act. The state laws need to align because it's a common market. So you don't have disruptions to end users, consumers like yourself. But at the same time, giving the states the room to create more. So what you have will be more competition at distribution level. We're not all going to now be dependent on the national grid. Within our states, we can have our state grids, we can have state distributors give us electricity as opposed to what we currently have, which is the national grid provision, and if the national grid is down, we don't have any power.
But what about, because when you say more competition at the distribution level?
Yes.
What about transmission?
Transmission is an interesting, the reason why you have transmission in the first place is if you're doing long distance transportation of electricity. Now, what the law says is that states can only make laws for electricity within their states. You're not allowed to do interstate. So intrastate, you can make laws. So that then makes you realize that there's no need to put transmission infrastructure. It's very expensive.
I thought Kaduna was doing something like that previously.
No, there's transmission infrastructure, but guess what? You can generate somewhere here and serve the entire Guzakwe area or even Abuja itself, and have its own power plant and distribute the power within Abuja without creating a transmission backbone. When I mean transmission, we're talking of high voltage transmission lines, 132, 330. That doesn't mean you will not have medium voltage, low voltage lines, but Typically, when we say transmission, we're talking of high voltage lines, which are built to carry transport power for long distances. You might say, like a state like Cross Rivers, that end to end is over 400 kilometers. You might need a transmission infrastructure, but it's expensive. Why do you need a transmission infrastructure where you have energy sources close by? You may as well just tap your energy sources and provide power to the last mile user without having to build a $1 million per kilometer transmission backbone. You don't need that.
So a lot of states are looking at decentralizing their power and making sure they're able to utilize as much of whatever available resource is present in a particular area to serve localities. Yes. That's what they're looking at.
Yes.
But I don't know if you're able to shed light on what some states are exploring, because some states seem to have multiple options. If you come to, say, northern Nigeria, where there is the abundance of the sun, a lot of them might be looking to explore the sun. Maybe in the Niger Delta, gas might be an option. But from what you've seen so far, what are some of the options that some states are exploring?
The states are exploring all the energy resources available, right? And a lot of the states are now carrying out what you call your integrated resource planning, which is to dimension your energy resource and also your requirement, your load requirement, and where you need it, right? And also the affordability. So that planning process is going on, because without that planning, you may struggle to attract the necessary investments. You may struggle to know, is solar best for us? Is your mini hydros best for us? Or how do we continue to get power? How do we do gas to power? How do we utilize our gas resources for power? So clearly, for states like Delta, Rivers, they will utilize their gas resources. It's a no-brainer there. States in the north, they're looking at how best to utilize their solar resources. But then you must tie it to the end user. You must tie it to consumers, right? So that's where that planning is going on. For Lagos State, that has a clear roadmap in terms of their integrated resource planning, it's all done. They're looking at a mix of solar and gas. And so renewable energy, they're looking at their rooftops, how to put solar panels on rooftops. They're looking at how to put solar panels on the lagoon, what you call floating solar, right? So just looking at all the energy resources you can tap in an affordable and sustainable manner. So once, and a lot of states are going through that process, and once it's done, it's clear that they will start the implementation. But first things first is to create the structures they need to regulate the market. So they are now at the point where they're creating the state electricity regulators, because without that, you really can't go forward. It's the state regulators that will then put out all the terms, the license conditions, and also see how to utilize those energy resources.
From end to end, in a continuous concerted format, if a state really puts its heart to it, how long do you think that it should take a very serious-minded state government to be able to achieve, from planning to implementation? How long do you think it should take them to be able to get results?
Well, it depends on what we refer to as results, because even passing the law.
Let me confirm my own results. Results will be electricity in the homes of Nigerians. That's the result I'm referring to.
So, like I said, that initial planning needs to happen, because then that will dimension how quickly or how best the state can attract investors to provide the power, and that the power gets to you. Now, some states are far ahead of the curve, like Edo State. They already have a power company called Osioma Power, and they've built generation, and then they've done their distribution infrastructure. We're just waiting for the law, and then once Edo State creates its regulatory arm, that will determine how end users like yourself will connect. Some states have started the process. They need to make they need to create their regulators. Keep in mind, it's the regulator that will issue licenses. Electricity is a licensed business. So once the regulators get off the ground, investors will come, and then licenses will be issued. Give or take, from next year, you should start seeing states who are already far ahead change the dynamics of the electricity markets.
What is your thinking? Okay, you want to follow up on that?
Well, he said by next year we should begin to...
Some states that are far ahead of the curve, not all states.
Oh, okay. Well, that'll be good. But what's your thinking about, because, right now, there's this argument about the service charter, where they wonder, yes, you're supposed to provide electricity, but when you don't fulfill those terms of service, there's nothing that seems to happen to those persons on the part of the consumers now. And so many areas of that service charter still not being strictly adhered to. You know how customers purchase several things. In fact, they'll tell you point blank, the discourse, you buy this, buy that, all of those things happen. So for these states now, in terms of ensuring that consumers don't get the short end of the stick, how much of that conversation features in all of this plan, so that at the end of the day, they know, if I'm coming into the sector, it will be run professionally. We know that all parties will adhere to the rules without maybe somebody coming off worse.
Great question. Part of the regulations is that part of the regulation, the Act transitions NERC's ability to regulate these schools to states. That includes service charter. The challenge we've had is NERC is somewhere in Abuja, maybe you're in Lagos or somewhere in those states, and then to file your complaints takes a while. NERC to treat it is, so we've seen a situation where the ability to enforce service charter by NERC has been a challenge, a lot of constraints. Now, with states taking over the regulatory provisions for these schools, states are closer to the customers. So, for instance, take Edo State, where Edo State, they're making plans to make sure that the school in that state provides services that they've signed up to already. So in other words, if you are supposed to give an area, say, 16 hours of supply, the state is now putting in place structures to make sure they get 16 hours of supply, and also making regulations to make sure there are sanctions where it doesn't apply. Lagos State, they're thinking of how to make sure Lagosians have meters and not rely on a Eko Disco or a Ikeja Disco to think of where to raise money to buy meters, right? So a number of, some of the states are now becoming creative to say, look, at the end of the day, it's not only about us building new generation and distribution infrastructure, is making sure that the discos in our states provide good service, and they're now trying to craft the regulations to make sure they're able to enforce a lot of these service charters, right? So,
and they can do that.
Oh yes.
Oh, it's a good thing to note. I think the question I was going to ask you just quickly came back, which was around generation. We know a number of generation companies are situated close to where it is they can get access to resources that will help with generation. Are they also free to supply state governments? I mean, a number of them are currently connected to the national grid. Would they also be able to supply capacity to state?
So that's the wholesale market. Those, the on-grid generators, we've got 26 of them. They will supply electricity to the national market, right? So that's the wholesale market.
That's what the law says.
Yes, because they sell their power to the national grid. The national grid is an interstate grid network. So that power will go to the grid. That's the wholesale market. Provided that the power is, so if a state licenses a generation company, the expectation is that generation company will only provide power within the state. It cannot export the power even to the next state, right? But if it puts the power on the national grid, then it no longer becomes it now becomes the responsibility of NERC to license that entity, and no longer the state. So everything about the state has to be curtailed within the territory of the state for it to be licensed and regulated by the state.
Not bad. All right. Ayo's got questions too. I think he loves. He's thinking about results too, like everybody else. Ayo.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Just two questions that I want to ask you, sir. What are the booby traps for states? I'm looking at a list of 9 agencies of the federal government that I don't know how effective or not they have been since 2005, almost 20 years now. There's NERC, you've been talking about NERC. There's a Transmission Company of Nigeria. There's NEMSA, Electricity Management Services. There's Electricity Liability Management Company. There is bulk electricity. What are the booby traps that states must avoid so we don't have the same kind of what a number of people have called complex systems, you know, when they are setting their own systems to make electricity work for the people?
I would call them booby traps. I'll call them concerns, right? In terms of concerns, the first is your regulatory risk. And it's important that if the states do not set up their regulators properly, then you would have a challenge of attracting the right investors and investment into the state, which is why where states are now is trying to create effective regulators. The other concern that is there is the concern about the viability of state electricity markets. And that concern, again, dovetails into some form of regulation and the state electricity policy to make sure that people who are able to, people who are the low end of, people who are the lower end of the economy are able to afford electricity. So everything dovetails around the regulatory and legal and policy framework around the states, which is where the Nigerian Governors Forum now come in, because they now have a program called the National National Electricity Market Support Program. And it's a program that is managed under the auspices of the Nigerian Governors Forum and with very key stakeholders, including the federal government, the development partners like the World Bank, UK NAF, and all the rest, to start to build capacity, regulatory capacity, legal capacity, institutional capacity at subnational level, so that they can, states can drive their electricity market. States may not need to replicate a TCN structure, but you would need to issue licenses, you would need to regulate businesses, you would need to set tariffs that are commensurate to that are affordable, but at the same time provide a return to investors that will come in. You will need to cater for people who are at the lower end of the economy, making sure that they're affordable. I'm seeing meters on your screen. You need to make sure people are metered, right? So, but those concerns are being addressed because, or rather, those concerns are noted, and from a holistic level, the NGF is trying to make sure that states do not pass different electricity laws that make it unworkable for the federal government or for the federal electricity market to work. So, harmonization of laws, alignment of laws and policies, so that we don't have one state making a law that makes it impossible for TCN to bring power into their state because they made their laws are not aligned to what will make electricity flow naturally. So those concerns are there, and the national subnational electricity markets program has started running. We had a capacity building program over the last 2 days. It was organized by the NGF and with support from the UK NAF and the UK government. We had a lot of states in attendance, and it was a very clear eye-opener for the states. Look, this thing is very interesting, but these concerns need to be addressed. And they've gone back, they've taken note, they're going back to address some of these concerns.
I think they're very interesting. So moving forward, I mean, we'll look forward to a lot more of those kind of sessions so that lots of businesses and Nigerians can know what opportunities, what avenues exist for them to leverage on, because look, at this point where we're all thinking about how to cut costs and ensure that businesses stay afloat, I think this would be hugely significant if they can sort all of these things out. So yeah. Okay, well, thank you for coming on. So we'll look forward to more engagements with the NGF and the states as well. So, Ojo Nomofama, lead consultant, power sector to Nigeria Governors Forum. Thank you, and we wish everyone there all the best to ensure that things work.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.